Only mode.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Landscape Institute webinar series. My name is Lauren, I'm the events executive here. And today we are joined by Lydia Ragoonanan from the Rethinking Parks program. She's the program manager. And we're going to have a webinar today on Rethought Parks from Rethinking Parks. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Lydia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lauren. Hello, everybody on the end of the webinar. So I'm Lydia Ragoonanan. I'm the Rethinking Parks Program Manager, and I'm based at Nesta, which is the UK's Innovation Foundation. So I'm not a parks expert, I'm going to say that from the outset, but I do have a background in government innovation, and so Nesta, in terms of its innovation capacity, came together with the Heritage Lottery Fund and the Big Lottery Fund to deliver this program. So I'll be taking you through today just bear with me while I get the mouse and the slides working for us. Great. Going through a little bit about the context of Rethinking Parks, how we came to do this program, what we have learnt to date, and the recommendations for the sector, as well as diving into a little bit of the projects that we worked on through this program. So the context for Rethinking Parks is really, as you know, parks are this great British innovation. But public parks are now under threat, so it won't be any surprise to you that local government funding is being cut to the point where we might say it's hemorrhaging over the next few years, and as a non-statutory service, many public parks are under severe threat. So this is a quote from one of the team that was involved in Rethinking Parks, saying, "We're having to make huge savings. We have lost 50% of our staff, down from 90 to 45, which is probably not an experience that's dissimilar from many of you if you work in a parks environment. But the area of the park, of course, remains the same, and the public expectations as to the quality of parks remain the same. And this anecdote, if you like, is backed up by a piece of research that the Heritage Lottery Fund did in 2014 called the State of UK Public Parks, that found that 45% of parks and parks managers are considering selling off or transferring parks to others. So in this backdrop, knowing that there's a severe threat to public parks, and that, you know, in memorable history, they've really been funded by local authority funding. How do we solve this challenge? What do we do about this? And it was identified that innovation can be a way that we can find new business models and stimulate some new ideas. So Rethinking Parks is a program, and today I'll be talking about the lessons from Rethinking Parks. There's a £1 million fund to test new business models that may sustain public parks in the UK in the face of significant cuts. The program, as I've mentioned, was jointly funded by the Big Lottery Fund and the Heritage Lottery Fund, who've invested over £800 million in public parks over the last couple of decades. So they've got an interest and, if you like, a real stake in the ground about protecting our public parks. And they felt that some new ideas and new stimulation was needed for the sector. So that's why they've partnered with Nesta, where I'm from, to develop this program. So Rethinking Parks is a different kind of program from many grant-funded programs for public parks. It was really an experimental program that looked at trying something new and having the systems in place from those that we've funded to learn and to test and to understand that so that others might learn from it. Within the spectrum of government innovation, I'm going a bit policy speak here, but within the spectrum of government innovation, you have things that are very detailed, very precise kind of research, where you might have a random control trial comparing a situation in one environment to that's of a particular set of conditions to another environment that you're doing, have something different in place to test. Rethinking Parks wasn't that. It was really just trying something new and having the systems in place to learn from it. The way the program worked was that in 2013, Peter Neal was commissioned, who's a known and respected landscape consultant, was commissioned to develop a report called Rethinking Parks. The idea of that was really to raise awareness of the sector, of the ideas and the kinds of innovations that we might be looking for this fund. It was complemented with, at that time, with the launch of the program itself. So we wanted an open call, and so we went across the UK and said, not just to local parks authorities, but to charities and any group that may be interested, what idea that do you have that you want to test that might help close the gap, the funding gap for public parks? So do you have a new way of thinking about how you might maintain parks? Do you have a new idea about using parks that could generate income or reduce cost? And we will support you over this 18-month period to test that idea and to give you some specialist expertise in that process and to record the impact of that. So the program was really about casting a wide net. That's why we've got these kind of 2 diamonds here, which is asking people to think very widely in the first instance, and that awareness raising. We've got 209 expressions of interest from the sector. And then from that, we whittled it down to working with 11 teams over an 18-month period to support them and to really test the idea. So I mentioned this as an experimental program. It was different from a normal kind of grant fund where you might get some money to deliver a specific objective. We didn't really know where these projects were going to go. The idea was to take the best ideas and the best teams to support them to prototype an idea and test it in the very early stages, to give them specialist support. So for example, they all had access to financial expertise, to user insights expertise, to marketing expertise, to governance support. The work is a cohort program, so we brought all of those teams together on a quarterly basis to meet, to share ideas. And they also, that's the networking part, and they also had an opportunity and a requirement to reflect on what was working well for them at a particular period of time and what wasn't. So this kind of combination, I suppose, of funds, so they're all given a share of the £1 million, support, the ability to come together and this focus on reflection, are all components that are similar to private sector incubator programs that support very early startup ideas. So we were basing Rethinking Parks on this model, taking very, very early stage ideas and seeing which ones had potential in a really supportive environment. Okay, so I mentioned we worked with 11 projects. I'm just going to touch on a few of them very simply as we go through, but you'll see that there's quite a diverse portfolio of ideas here. So we really went for a diversity of ideas rather than an even geographic spread of people. And these ideas from these 11 teams really fall into 3 particular themes. One theme was around public donations. So you may be familiar with models in the United States where they have parks foundations, for example, or even within the UK, museums and art galleries often have opportunities to draw on public donations. Within the park sector in the UK, that concept isn't really one that's taken hold or is introduced. So we wanted to test that and test the opportunity for the public to donate to local authority and other parks. So that was one theme. We had another theme about new forms of management. So I'm not going to, the theory here is if you can see the text in red, they're the ones I'll dive into deeper. The text in black I'm not going to touch on today because there's not a lot of time, but bear with me and I'll tell you where you can find out more about them. So the second theme here was about new forms of management. This is where you might take a step away from the local authority management kind of concept and approach and maybe think about where the local community can play a greater part in managing parks, or an independent trust or charity could take on that role. As I say, we're not going to touch too much on that today, but you can find out more on the Rethinking Parks website. We've also got a theme around engaging businesses. So 3 of the projects involved in Rethinking Parks really stretch the envelope on how we engage business, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the further slides. Fourthly, we had people looking at, or teams looking at income from buildings. So this is, for example, one of our projects, East Brooking Rekindled, wondered whether an underused public building in East Brooking Country Park in Barking and Dagenham could become an enterprise hub for eco-businesses. So this is really where businesses of a particular slant that have an ecological kind of perspective can raise money, would want to be housed in this building, and therefore income can be raised for parks from that. And the fifth area or theme is really wider benefits. So what we mean by that, where there's a way to increase cost or increase income or reduce cost for parks, but at the same time, there's an environmental or social benefit from that particular project. So I'll move now on to looking at three of the themes here in red in a bit more detail. So we had three teams looking at public donations. Bournemouth Parks Foundation established a charity that was based on a US Parks Foundation model. So in particular, they had a good relationship with the Seattle Parks Foundation, and the team drew on that network and that knowledge to help develop a similar model for Bournemouth. So they've actually now established this independent charity from the local authority. And in their first year of operation, which was last year, remembering this was an 18-month program to support them, they focused on impact digital giving. So one thing that's a real innovation here is technology with giving now is such that you can pay for things quite readily by Apple Pay and contactless payments. The Bournemouth Parks Foundation wondered how that technology could be used to entice people when they're in a park to actually use that technology to give in the space. So they created two installations in their parks. That one was, for example, a parrot that was near an aviary that they wanted to update, that encouraged people to give through that combination of digital giving, but also people being in that space where they feel that, if you like, the love for the park. Could that love be translated to giving in that environment? The second idea, we all know that crowdfunding is an established way to pay for civic projects. My Park Scotland wanted to test whether this kind of crowdfunding idea could be bespoke and dedicated just for parks. So they've created a website that doesn't just have this crowdfunding opportunity for specific parks projects, but also has a rich set of information about parks in both Glasgow and Edinburgh as their first places of focus for the first year. The third project in the space was called Healy Subscription Society. Healy is a community park in Sheffield. So that means it's not managed by the local authority, and it was testing whether donations for a subscription scheme would be. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Whether they could get donations from a subscription scheme for the community, and they tested a bit. It's kind of like Bournemouth, much smaller scale, didn't have the digital installations, but were really testing whether that sense of community connectivity to their park meant that people would give something on a year-on-year basis. So again, that was a difference between Bournemouth and Healy. I'm going to focus now a little bit on engaging businesses. So you might already know that business engagement already happens in parks, and in fact that there's an article in today's Guardian that looks at Rethinking Parks as a program, but also looks at some of the other ways out there that may be more controversial ways that commercialisations of parks is taking place. We wanted to test ideas that engaged businesses without commercialising public spaces. And this is what these three ideas we're looking at. So Park Hack was a partnership between Groundwork London, London Borough of Hackney, and Gensler, the architect firm. And they were really focused on how could they work with the creative industries and startups in Shoreditch to gather that energy and that creative spirit to come up with ideas and implement them that would improve parks. That concept and the way that they've approached that engagement, their connection has been really successful. the first manifestation of the idea, so this Park Hack Innovators, which is this forum of businesses who's supported by the local council to come up with and implement ideas for the parks. Their first idea was something you might be familiar with because it got so much press attention last year, was a tree office in Hoxton Square. And the concept of the tree office was to generate income for the park through people booking out that space for meeting rooms or hot desking and hot working. Other ideas that the team have developed through that Park Hack Innovators project have been things like a Hackney festival fair that's now going to be running for a year, from which the process, which has completely been from concept through to implementation, has been developed by these businesses. And I think one of the key approaches that helps this Park Hack Innovators concept work is the fact that from the get-go they linked in with the business community through their business partnership forum at the council, and they I suppose opened up at a very early stage to say, what are your ideas and how can we work with you so that they can be developed, more, rather than perhaps a more traditional local authority approach that has been to say, here's our ideas from the local authority's perspective, and which ones of those do you like? So this was really getting in at a much earlier stage. And right for that kind of industry and those businesses in that area of London as well. Completely different approach to engaging businesses was Darlington Rethinking Parks, where they took, we know that some corporates volunteer in parks occasionally at the moment. What they wanted to do is make a regular commitment from some big businesses in Darlington that they would come out every month to improve parks, and particularly through like capital improvement projects. So they managed to work, this is a partnership between Groundwork North East, a ground space charity, Darlington Borough Council, and a corporate social responsibility organisation called Darlington Cares. And this team had a series of activities throughout the year that organisations like EE and Cummings could join, that I suppose provided a nice experience for the staff who were attending, and also maximise parks improvements. So they really carefully selected the activities in the park or what the improvements would be, so that they were of a high value to the Borough Council and to the park. So for example, taking up a pathway and replacing that and getting volunteers to help with that, staff to help with that, volunteers like doing, but also it was a very valuable activity in terms of what it would have cost to have got done externally. So Bloomsbury Square tested this idea that you could have a parks improvement district that was just focused on parks in the Bloomsbury area of London. It's a kind of a similar concept to the way that Bryant Park, which is a very famous park in New York, is funded, and Manhattan is funded. They weren't successful, unfortunately, in convincing businesses to contribute to the business improvement district, but that process of engaging and working with teams and working with businesses across the year has meant there's been enough interest to look at setting up an independent parks foundation for that area. They really built the business interest through a demonstration project in one of the squares affected, which is Red Lion Square. So rather than just lobbying, they actually had a couple of engagement days in the square where they invited residents and others to learn a bit more about the square, some of the challenges that they are facing, and on the basis of that, some income and contributions and other support came forward for that particular square. Okay, so the third area I wanted to focus on of the ideas that we've tested through Rethinking Parks is this concept of wider benefits. So this is where you might have a way to reduce cost or increase income for parks, and whilst you do that, you actually have a bigger benefit that's achieved as well. In the case of Bristol Parkwork, their idea was about providing training in horticulture and the work experience for people who needed to enter the employment market but were having difficulty doing so. So these are people who may be recovering from some kind of substance abuse, or may have learning difficulties. So they, as Bristol Parkwork, also was a kind of a combination of Bristol Parks Forum and Bristol City Council brought this idea together. Similar to Darlington Rethinking Parks, the activities for these participants that were chosen were very carefully selected so that they maximise the improvements to parks and participants. They also made sure, and it's a bit of a kind of a wrangle for them, they also made sure that the participants, the time frame of this training was such that participants didn't lose out on any eligibility for benefits that they might otherwise occur. So over, I think, 12 weeks, you lose the ability to have benefits if you're volunteering for something, whereas this project was in 8-week blocks. Secondly, Burnley Go to the Park was another approach that had a wider benefit, this time not necessarily for people seeking employment, but for reducing CO2 emissions and increasing the biodiversity of parks. So what Burnley's done is actually, and it probably strikes me with many of the ideas, they're not necessarily new, but the combinations of activities or the way they've approached the problem is new. So Burnley's introduced more natural maintenance techniques for their parks, things like quite an aggressive move from formal grass to meadows, from replacing annuals with perennials, from less intensive woodland management techniques. And for each of those areas, they've also introduced specialist volunteering opportunities, and the volunteers work alongside staff to deliver these changes. So that's that idea. So what have we learned from Rethinking Parks? Now I've given you a flavour of what we've tested and what are the insights. Well, after 18 months, we kind of realised that people can and do contribute their energy, and it's all about the new people. So we know Heritage Lottery, others know that friends of groups and others make a massive contribution to public parks. I think what we've found is that a whole new strata and selection of people have stepped forward. Businesses are really engaged in giving their energy, not necessarily in ways that commercialise parks. You know, who would have thought that entrepreneurs from Shoreditch would have put up their hands to turn up on a monthly basis to help? Pardon me. Some of the insights around how we do this is to listen to and work with the needs of that target audience. I think all the teams that have been really successful have thought about not just what they can do for the park, to paraphrase, but what the park, what they can do for them as well. So as an example, part of the engagement the park had was really putting on events or helping engage with those people in a way that worked with their timeframes and stimulated their ideas in a way that resonated for them. Darlington Rethinking Parks looked at how one of the wider objectives for some of the organisations they worked with was to increase the number of the access or take up, if you like, of the volunteering days staff were allowed. Found that only 5% of staff traditionally took up all the days or allowance they had from organisations, so they helped them with that. They also realised that actually if they provided a good team building experience for participants, that had a different kind of value rather than corporate social responsibility for teams. Yeah, so, and also some people, wider sets of volunteers maybe want to engage in parks but don't necessarily want to do that through a friends of groups. So I think that's where, say, Burnley Go to the Park has opened that opportunity up to learn some more specialist skills rather than necessarily taking on what can be sometimes a more advocacy or fundraising role within a park. They've also linked with established networks to reach new people. You've heard me talk a little bit about that, where people have worked in, that's been a very helpful way of doing it. And also had this sweet spot where what's the greatest benefit to parks and what's the greatest benefit to participants. And actually sometimes working that out takes a little bit of time. Another highlight we've found is that reducing costs needn't be at the expense of parks user experience. For me, this is quite a nice, well, it's a great outcome. It's not to say that this works in any case, we're not saying that at all, but Burnley was able to achieve the impact they did, and I'll talk a little bit about the impact in a minute, because they really understood that people, one of the things people from their user feedback they found loved about the park was this connectiveness to nature. And they use that as a way to think actually connectedness to nature means that there's perhaps an opportunity to make the park more wild. And in doing so, they could make small changes combined together and achieve what you'll see is quite a substantive or significant impact on the cost of the park. In saying that, communication with staff and stakeholders is key. So I would never have said, you know, let's not say that you can always reduce cost and it's going to improve something. That's not the case. But actually, when it's done in a thoughtful, meaningful, engaged way, it can be achieved. And, you know, the other thing, I suppose, the third kind of point to make too, the thing that we've found is people's love of parks can translate to giving. I think when we began this program, and it's very early days, I should say that all of these projects are really early days, thinking that when we started with them, the ideas were, you know, something written down on paper. They've come a very long way since we started working, and basically they really only fully launched in summer last year. And in that time, we've realised people do donate to parks. Donation models, foundation models, are absolutely a longer-term endeavour. So most of the projects are, and part of that is because they've got high proportional operating costs. You need someone there to be, if you like, feeding the communications, making the link back to people who donate, getting the message out there, and all of that costs money. Nevertheless, it's money that would otherwise, or resource that would otherwise never have been packed into. It creates new income, but it's very much dependent on the ask, and really requires a culture shift too, I think, to give to parks. It's not something that the UK public or private sector are really akin to or familiar with, and I think it's a long journey for people to go on. Pardon me, I'm just going to take a sip of water, so feel free to have a look at this slide in more detail. So I'm just going to touch on very briefly here on 4 of the projects that have made or have potential. So this is our projected view of what we think they'll make over the next few years in terms of funding. The Bristol Park work, this is the project you'll remember that combined opportunities for training and work experience for people who were what you could say are furthest from the labour market to get that experience in a parks environment, and the things they work on are really carefully chosen so they make a good impact in terms of improving the park. And so that project, as it's currently looked at, looks like for every pound that the Bristol City Council can invest, they will get £2.40 back in terms of improvements for parks, which we think is a really good benefit. Not only that, of the program last year, of the 17 participants that went on the program, 7 have gone into either full-time employment or training, which is a really good strike rate for projects of that nature. And one of the reasons Bristol City Council is so supportive of this idea is because of that return on investment, not just financially for the park, but also socially. So I think that's really great opportunity for programs like this and projects that achieve both a social benefit as well as a financial benefit for parks. Bournemouth Parks Foundation, and the picture here of the parrot is actually one of the installations that Bournemouth put in place to generate income for parks. So if you put money or you text a donation to the parrot, it will tell you a really bad parrot joke. Yeah, in return, it's raised. I think in the summer it was raising. I'll get the figures for you, but about £1,000 a week. We've got projections, and I'll say that, but it's a pretty good little earner. It's turned out to be for the Bournemouth Parks Foundation. Interestingly, we think we're still on the cusp of digital giving, so they haven't seen most of those donations come through from text donations at the moment. They're still cash, but you know, as these technologies become more widespread, and as people carry less cash in their pockets, we think over the next few years that will change. See, the graph here shows you the projected income from donations up until 2020, and so this is new kind of money we think they wouldn't have otherwise received, and you know, it makes a nice little impact for parks in Bournemouth over that period of up to and over £40,000. Darlington Rethinking Parks, this is a project that combined regular volunteering from big organisations and parks and again, carefully selecting the projects. They, for every £1 investment in, we think that Darlington Borough Council can get £1 investment back. You'll probably note that each of the Darlington Rethinking Parks and the Park Work program also rely on income from other sources. To complement this, part of our project outputs, which I'll talk about, is some model descriptors for each of these projects, the 7 of the Rethinking Parks projects for each of these 4 that I'm talking about now, and you can go into that detail and find out what that mix of investment and income looks like in more detail. The final project that I'm going to talk about in terms of financial impact is Burnley Go to the Park, and by 2020 they're going to be topping, actually I can't quite see the last, 100 bear with me folks, edging up to £120,000 of savings every year, and that's kind of steady state, so they'll keep on increasing that. And you'll remember this project is really just about making a few small changes to the park to improve the biodiversity. One of the things you can see here in the picture is a picture of one of the world's first urban bee cages. So it's really become the physical manifestation of this project for the team. They've prototyped and invented this bee cage where bees can help pollinate the wildflowers within parks. But also they want to build up a bee population of, I think, 40,000 bees, not just in parks, but in other spaces. And I think they'll be able to make income from pollination services as well as the honey. So these cages can be within the park, and another way that can help improve, I suppose, and people's connectedness with nature. So it's got this dual benefit again. So that's a bit of an insight into some of the projects we've worked on and their specific impact and what they've done. In the last few minutes, I'm just going to touch on some reflections from the program. And so what does this all mean for you guys listening, and what does this mean for the sector? So I think looking across all the parks and all the projects, one of the things we've realised is that no business should count on one source of income alone. All the quotes that you're going to see here are from our Rethinking Parks teams. And this is one from Andy Jackson and Healing. So we think that local authority funding is going to continue to be a very important source of income for all public parks, or most of the public parks, for the foreseeable future. Nevertheless, on top of that, it's almost like parks need to start layering a cake of income, if you like. So they need events, they need to find ways to engage new volunteers. We need to find new ways to use buildings to bring in income and engage businesses. We need to change how we plant, and we need to have this idea that we get public donations as well. So I don't think, from Rethinking Parks, we haven't found any one idea that's going to completely replace local authority funding. Some will go quite a way to reduce the gap in funding that they're facing as a result of the funding crunch, but none of them will do that completely. And even if you look at the really successful parks models internationally, most of them have this layered income approach. And I think that's a step change that the sector needs, or one of the step changes that we're probably foreseeing for the sector. You have to know your local context and build relationships with parks, with relationships with people who use parks. So I think context really matters. So we don't think that any of the ideas here will apply everywhere. We think that you can adapt them, but a starting point has to be to understand what do people love about the spaces where you are, and how can you open up the conversation and engage them to help develop some ideas too. So this little pop-up that's come up with the white cube was something that was in your picture that I hope you can see. The white cube was put into a number of squares around Hoxton to encourage people to reflect at the beginning of the park hack process. Funnily enough, somebody came up with this idea that it should be free cow for all hipsters, and I think that sums up the kind of Shoreditch area for you, which is very different from the picture you'll see on the your right-hand side of the screen, which is some folks in Bournemouth, an engagement exercise there that looked at using, I'm told they're not rubber ducks, but they're not real ducks either, duck racing to help people be involved in thinking about awareness raising for the foundation, what more they might want to see in those spaces. So horses for courses, bring people in early, ask them what they want, help them design, if you like, and deliver what works. This picture here is a picture of our financial expert working with the Rethinking Parks teams, and you really need to have, I can't emphasise this enough, a clear understanding of your finances, your asset base, and your workforce relating to parks. I think one of the things that we've really emphasised through this program is you have to understand your benchmark for your finances and really get down into some detail there so you can understand what opportunities there are for improvement or where you can work from. And I suppose my experience of working with the teams we worked with is that level of expertise is patchy, and there's room for improvement in some places. And that experience is kind of echoed in what the State of UK Public Parks report from HLF found. So if you can, beg, borrow, steal some insights, advice from your finance sector. If you're in a local authority, work with your finance team. Sometimes I wonder whether we need some kind of exchange program with the financial kind of sector, or with people who are accountants or business people, so that we can pass on that knowledge to one another. I think it's a key part of the skill set for parks people. Partnership working is really important. So working with public sector resources shrinking, partnership working is ever more critical. A lot of the ideas that have been successful through Rethinking Parks, we think, have been so because of the partnerships that have come out with them. So we've seen, for example, the partnership between even charitable sectors, so Groundwork London working with Hackney Borough Council and working with Gensler and other architectural firms. When you've got a rich network to draw on, you've got a new set of skills and resources and ideas, and even different perspectives. And I think that's really helpful when you're in a very tight, difficult situation. Sometimes it's hard to see your way out. Maybe bringing in some other partners is a really helpful way to open up opportunities you might not have thought of yourself, but also bring in those skills and expertise to deliver as well. There's a flip side to partnerships, which you really need to be clear from the outset what expectations are and how they might be delivered. But we're really advocating that we need more partnerships within the sector to deliver new business models to help public parks. We're getting there. So another reflection is ensure you learn from activities and are able to change quickly and act on learning. So this idea of testing and iterating has been at the core of the Rethinking Parks program. And probably one, I don't know the range of audiences that I'm speaking to now, but I think in some cases the local authority sector and the government sector has been less hot on the tails of these ideas that are more prevalent in the private sector, and taking ideas, not investing a lot of money from the get-go and rolling them out, but testing them at an early stage, but in a practical sense, so you can learn what works, what doesn't, refine it, and get it right for a wider audience. So we're really advocating that happens in testing and developing even more business models for parks, and regardless of what you're doing, to try and program this for anything new that you're approaching. Kind of final point I want to make is one that I hope sheds some hope on things. So we don't have to keep doing things the same way we've always done them. And I think it's really, as I was saying, it's really hard sometimes when you're faced with massive challenges to try and kind of think of some new ideas out of the box, or to cling on to the same way that you've done things because they feel safe and familiar. But what we've learned from this program is there are things you can do that can change, can adapt, can provide hope. So that's where I'll leave things. I'm going to open things up for questions now. Probably the final thing to say is, backing this up, we've got a wealth of resources available now, and available from, it's actually the 23rd, we'll be launching our overall Rethinking Parks report that goes into a bit more detail. And also we have available now is 7 of the detailed model descriptions from 7 of the ideas tested in Rethinking Parks. These set out what teams did, what impact they made, what they wish they had done differently, and advice for you, but also a little quick how-to guide if you wanted to replicate some of the ideas I've talked about today in your own environment. So I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you very much, Lydia. I really enjoyed that one. The person who was family in Bristol was really great to see and one hear that they were having good return on investment and thinking outside the box and doing things and setting some kind of precedent. And the Bournemouth as well, I thought that was ingenious. And I think your point about we haven't really tapped into that criteria in this sector. So it's quite interesting that they're using that duck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fabulous. I had a little giggle there in the corner. Not too many people there, but fantastic. And we all need to think a little bit more outside the box and maybe, like you said, use other industries as examples of right. So I'm just reading the questions as I was speaking there. So yeah, sorry, some of you I did see as well when I was listening. There was a little bit of an audio problem, so I do apologise about that. Can't control the internet, obviously. Some weeks it's better than others. And as you know, also we do record these webinars every week. So if there was something that you just didn't quite hear, or you want to read again, or you want to watch again, it will be on YouTube. Give us a few days, and it will be on there either from our YouTube channel or linked from our webinar page on the main Landscape Institute website. So there's a few questions coming in now.
So yeah, we've got a question from Robert, who says, which initiative provided the most community ownership of parks? So there's different ways to answer this. We didn't look at a specific model that turned over ownership of parks to a community. The closest we got was Everton Community Hub, which was a program that was a joint program between the Land Trust and the Friends of Everton Park in Everton Parks in Liverpool. It is quite a wide, large park that I suppose is it's a great space. Some bits of it have seen better days. And we were really interested in the Land Trust and the Friends of Group wanted to explore whether the Friends of Group could take on a wider range of ownership, if you like, and maintenance of that space. What we found with working with them is that the initial ambition of the Friends Group was high. They were a really motivated group, but actually once it dawned on them the difference in activities that they would need to be engaged in and the size of those activities that they would need to take on board to take on that longer term ownership. They felt actually our efforts are probably better focused in one specific area of the park. So for us, that was quite an interesting lesson, is that I think you hear some local authority out there, I've certainly heard them say, oh, actually it'll be Friends of Groups will have to take over maintenance of the parks in the future. I think what we have found in working with teams is that maybe Friends of Groups aren't the best position to do that, nor should they have to. But actually, if you look at a small space of the park, that could be quite feasible. Or if you have a Friends of Group working with another community partner, as the Land Trust and Friends of Group started to do, that can help too. So they've actually drawn on a wider set of volunteers from the wider sector who help support that longer term management. Having said that, they'll always know that a professional element obviously of maintaining that space will always be required, but I think that was interesting news for us as well. But remember, Friends of Group aren't the only organisations that we need to draw on or to support parks. There's a whole lot of new people that can step forward. I don't know whether that answered your question, Robert, but that's the best answer I can give. The other thing is I think we encouraged all of the teams from the beginning to get a consensus from, or at least engagement, you can never really have consensus, engagement from the community into the kind of ideas that they were testing. And we were really looking for more, for want of a better term, crowd-pleasing ideas than some of the other ways that you'll see the park sector responding to this funding challenge. So we got them to engage the community. That was the first thing. What do people think of your idea? How do they respond to it? That was the first thing we wanted teams to do. We've got another question here from Michael. What prompts a park project? Do you have local community engaging you for help? Or would it be a local authority? So I think if I can flip this around, thinking about the people that applied for the fund, we had a really nice mix of local authorities, community groups, but also new people came forward. So we had, let me think, some like learning institutions, we had architectural firms, maybe some of you are in architectural firms, so that's not weird, but Big Lottery and Heritage Lottery, who've invested a lot in these programs in the park, or parks programs, were quite surprised at the range of different organisations coming forward. So anything, any kind of organisation could have come forward for our fund. I don't think I can really talk to what prompts a park project in general, but for this fund, it was a really nice range and diversity of mix of teams. And within those ideas coming forward, we often had more than one partner involved. I think I've talked about that a bit. Hopefully that answers your question, Michael. A mix.
We certainly had a big mix when we put on competitions for parks and what's come forward practices-wise and doing collaborations between practices and planners and landscapers and architects. And,
right.
Collaboration is probably the way forward, getting the most minds around the table.
Exactly.
If nobody else has any questions for now,
are parks being used differently? Or have different requirements these days. So I can only really talk about the programs we've funded for Rethinking Parks. So I think I began the whole kind of series by saying I'm not a parks expert. I'm a government innovation expert. I've looked at these parks and we've worked with them. Some of the teams are using parks differently. So Hoxton Square would be an example where they put in the tree office, which was a beautifully designed space. Some might say that the design the usability of it, but that's another story, which I'll let you follow up on our resources. But that brought in people to use spaces for meetings. Who wouldn't love to have a business meeting in a park? And so that tested that idea. What other things have we seen? There's probably the most obvious example I can think of. I think there's rich territory for thinking about how we can use parks differently.
Well, the Olympic Park has got a myriad of different stories within
that's
it.
True.
From sports places to horticulture and education points, art play,
and libraries and parks. That's what I'd like to see more of. So, I was very lucky that I got to go to Brazil within this context of this program for something, and I was struck by the number of parks I went to in Brazil that had libraries in them, and I thought that was a brilliant idea.
Perhaps not for our weather.
Well, actually, not part of this program, but the team in Bournemouth actually were trying to work out. They've actually got a new space. It's more like a pocket park that's been set up next to a library, and they were trying to work out whether there was any correlation between improvement in visitors for the library because they had a park next to it. So I think for young kids, it's a really great combination. Well, who cares about kids? I do, but like anybody, that's a really nice idea that you can get a book lent and read it in the space of a park. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Things that complement each other and the encouragement of both in one. That makes very good sense. Yes, all right, marvellous. So, coming back, obviously Lydia said, she's not working, but we're here with the LI. We're doing this in partnership for a very good reason. We have a myriad of people behind the scenes, just the other side of the door, and 24 hours after each webinar, of course, as per usual, we will send out a feedback form. This is your chance, not your one and only, but always contact us, always get in touch, pick up the phone. We love to hear from you as your institute, and ask us as many questions as possible. We have Parks Alliance representative who works with us here, Nick McKellen, and we also have our head of technical and professional services, who is also a CMI landscape architect, Simon Adele. So do please send in your questions, and we aim, which in any way, to get your response back as soon as possible. Yes, just do get in touch. And just to reiterate, this will be on YouTube, so you can watch it again and again and again. Oh, okay, Robert, thank you. You're our guiding star on this webinar. You're telling us whether you can hear us or not. So I'm just saying that we are here as your institute, and do get in touch if you have any questions. We have parks experts here. We have landscape architects who work with us, and representatives from the Parks Alliance. So if you do have any more technical or historic parks questions, just email us and we will get back to you. No problem. All right, thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Lydia, so much for your time and coming in.
Thank
today.
you, Lauren.
Yeah, and well, since the sun's out in London, let's all go out and go to a park for the afternoon. I think that's general consensus.
Think of a better thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and see you next week. Bye. Thanks.